Teen Challenge is a group of caring people who keep reaching out to our youth with the freeing love of Jesus Christ. I've believed in this ministry since its very beginning, and I continue to support it.
Nestled within the serene landscapes of eastern Oklahoma, Brush Creek Youth Academy and New Lifehouse Girls Academy provide a nurturing sanctuary where troubled youth discover solace, guidance, and an opportunity to reshape the narratives of their lives. Situated along the shores of Grand Lake, New Lifehouse Girls Academy extends compassionate support to young girls grappling with behavioral issues and emotional trauma. Surrounded by tranquil scenery, the Academy provides a secure haven where young women can undergo healing, growth, and flourish into a transformative voyage towards self-empowerment and renewed purpose. Both academies are accredited high schools, ensuring students graduate with diplomas, laying a robust foundation for their future endeavors. Teen Challenge of Oklahoma Adolescent Centers, putting hope within reach of every teen struggling with addiction.
It all starts with a promise, a better future. You're told that you're going to a Christian boarding school, a place that will fix you, heal you. But when the doors close behind you and your parents walk away, everything changes. When girls arrive at Teen Challenge, they're often scared, confused, and overwhelmed. Some have been struggling with addictions. Others are there for mental health issues, behavioral concerns, or simply not fitting into their family's expectations. Most of the girls are under 18, and many don't even understand where they're going until they get there. If you're anything like me, you grew up hearing about these miracle programs that change lives, both for adults and adolescents.
Of the goodness of God. Yes, I'm gonna
It's a program that parents can rely on when their children need help and there are no resources available.
Yeah, I was all over the place. I never knew what I was doing, and my parents were always walking on eggshells. They didn't know what decisions to make or what to say or how I was going to react that day. I hurt myself all the time, and I just hated myself. I just did whatever I wanted. I didn't care about my family. My addictions and problems affected my family. I had just moved in with them like 3 years before I came to Teen Challenge because I got adopted. And the first year was all great, honeymoon phase.
So when I started to learn more about the troubled teen industry, I had to do more. When Lynn reached out, a student at the University of Michigan studying this because of her own time at a Teen Challenge program, I knew I had to learn more.
Good afternoon. Adult and Teen Challenge, how can I help you?
Hi, I'm calling to see if this is the right place to learn more about the Adolescent Girls Program.
Actually, we have a call center that has all of the intake experience that you would need to get more information. I can transfer you over there. Is that all right?
Yeah, that would be great. Hi, I'm calling to see if you can help me understand a bit more about your adolescent program for girls.
Okay, and how old is your daughter?
She's 15. For my daughter, she's not experiencing issues as much with common substance issues. It's more, right now it's pornography, unfortunately, and I do believe that they're smoking weed from time to time as well, but they're not currently needing to detox or anything like that. But I'm just trying to understand if you guys would accept something like that.
Right, but you say she's just periodically maybe smoking the weed.
Yeah, it's more of at this time, it's a pornography issue that we're trying to seek assistance for with her.
Okay. It doesn't sound like there's anything that would cause us not to be a good fit for her.
This call honestly confused me. Teen Challenge's website boasts care for issues that are psychiatric or medical in nature, at least requiring psychiatric medications or therapy. They specifically talk about teens who have had trauma or are struggling with mental health disorders or addictions. All of these issues, in my opinion, require, at the very least, a licensed therapist or trauma-informed staff going through appropriate training. Although this is presented as a treatment facility, it did alarm me right off the bat that my fictional 15-year-old daughter would be allowed to be admitted for potentially smoking marijuana, though I did say that it was unlikely she would test positive, and a porn addiction that I suspected. These are really, really minor reasons to try to put your child into a teen challenge program, a residential program with kids dealing with intense trauma, needing serious help for over a year. It was time to talk to Lynn firsthand and get her account of what being on site was like as an adolescent.
I had a very normal childhood. I was very close with my parents. I was an only child. I lived in like suburbs of Kansas, so really not too much going on there. Funny enough, I wasn't ever really inclined into school or research or really like anything academics. But when I was about 14, I was assaulted. And after that experience, I began using a lot of substances and hanging out with a lot of people that would give me access to substances and just living like a very dangerous and self-destructive lifestyle. And it led up to me actually running away from home multiple times, but the final time I made it about an hour and a half away from my family, and I was just sleeping like on the street basically for about 2 weeks, maybe a week. I don't actually really remember how much it was exactly. After that experience, my family had already found Teen Challenge before I had run away, and they had already spoken to some people there, and I found out about it and I didn't want to go. So that was the biggest thing that led me to running away. After that 2 weeks, I ended up reaching out to my parents, telling them where I was. And they brought me home and they enrolled me into Teen Challenge immediately. I was 14. I was one of the youngest people there too. So a lot of the girls that I knew were like 16 or 17 and kind of close to turning 18. My family drove me there. They were very adamant that they did not want to do that alternate route of having strangers do it. And I just remember being like really mad at my mom, and like I didn't say a single word on that car ride because I was just so mad. They told me that we were going and we lived about 3 hours away. So it was a 3 hour drive just in complete silence.
In the pamphlet they sent me, there's a sheet with frequently asked questions. One question is, does a student have to want to come to the program? Their response is, no. In most cases, the student that comes through our doors does not want to be here. They typically arrive upset and unwilling. Since we are considered a private Christian boarding school, if a parent signs a student in, they are the only ones to sign a student out. The only time a student has a say in whether or not they stay here is if they turn 18 whilst in the program.
When we got there, I immediately went into the intake process and they took my parents and kind of like ran them through, I imagine, just like what the like first couple of months would look like for me there probably. But I went in and I was strip searched, I was drug tested, and I was given an ankle monitor because I had run away before that experience. But they were basically like, you're here. You can't do anything about it. You're gonna have a buddy, which is an older girl or just a girl who had like been in the program for a little bit, who's gonna like walk you around and kind of explain all the rules. I knew I would be there for about a year. I really tried to work the program the best way I possibly could, and I would argue that I did. I made almost every single level on time except for two. I was never placed on D level because when you're on D level, your program progression freezes. Time basically is just lost. And so I was never put on D level, and I made my level progressions. And even then, it took me 15 months to graduate and get out of the program. So I went in when I was 14 and I got out a week before my 16th birthday. After that, I said bye to my parents and I was told that I wasn't going to be able to contact them for 2 weeks, not by like phone, letters, nothing. After that 2 week period, we had 3 phone calls a week. So we would have 2 10-minute phone calls. So one on Tuesday, one on Thursday. And then on Sunday, we would have 20-minute phone calls. My parents, they called me every single time when they weren't able to make a phone call, like one of my family members, like my grandma was calling me or something. And then we would get to see them once a month. It would depend on your level. So if you were an entry, like you were brand new, you could only see your parents for basically 8 hours and you had to stay on campus. And then if you were level 1, you got to go off campus, but you had to be back by the end of the night. And if you were level 2, you get to go home for one night. And then those nights increase with every single level that you have. I remember being really tired and really exhausted and not really like taking in any of the information that they were telling me. And I was like sober by that point, but I was just exhausted. Every single second of our day was scheduled out for us. We would wake up at around 6 a.m. and you would immediately have to get out of bed and get dressed, and you had chores that you had to do in the morning. We would be getting up and doing our chores for about an hour and a half, and then everybody would line up and go to breakfast, and we would go to school for about 4 hours, and then we would go to lunch and then do school for another 3 hours or so. It was an online program that we did that was a Christian online program. Imagine it would actually be kind of the same program as what some homeschoolers get, but it was all through a Christian lens. So all of the US history, we didn't learn anything about like Native Americans or like I remember actually being kind of embarrassed because I didn't have a full grasp of what the Trail of Tears was until I was in college. And I grew up in Kansas. Like that should not be a thing. And even with like biology, they would even though they didn't really talk about being transgender, they would say like, you know, there are only 2 genders, which I do not agree with. Or like in the world history books, they would start with like how God's formed the world in 7 days, and then they would just like jump to like 1650 or something.
It's clear that this facility utilizes an online program, so there's really no reason that the curriculum should be lacking or that the educational quality shouldn't be there. I had to do a little bit more work and ask a few more questions on the intake call that I did to understand what really goes on in these classrooms and what is really available to these students. For students that have been abusing substances or having mental health issues, it is very common that they are also struggling with a learning disorder or ADHD or other types of things that may impact their ability to function well in a classroom setting. It seems like from what Lynn is saying and what my research is saying that they don't really have anyone there to identify those problems or help your student truly succeed. They do say that your child is assigned an advisor, but monthly check-ins where you're truly getting updates on your child's academic progress does not seem accurate. I just wanted to understand a bit more about the education. You guys are a longer program, so that's something that I'm a little concerned about. But do you guys follow the test scores? Are people testing at grade level when they leave?
That part I don't know about specifically. The students are given a computer. Their classes are done online. They do have teachers aides in the class to help with their studies if they're needing help with their classes. We are doubly encrypted, so any transcripts would transfer easily. The testing part, I'm not sure about. That would be something that I would need to find out for you.
And would I have access to the testing scores and all of that to just have an eye on the schoolwork, or is that something that I would be more hands off on?
That may be a part of like they give parents regular updates, so that would be something that would be part of what you could ask about their progress, or they would give you that progress information during those sessions.
Okay. And do you know what the communication is like or would be like with me?
Sure. They are not allowed to have their cell phones. They facilitate weekly phone calls.
Okay.
And so they do have a 4-week probation period on phone calls and visits, and they encourage communication through letters during this time.
But would I be getting updates from you guys?
As far as
just progress or any kind of updates?
Yeah, as far as anything outside of what is set up, like on their regularly scheduled communications, I'm sure you could call them if you had questions. I don't know that part specifically.
Okay, but it wouldn't. There's nothing set up like I would meet, once a month with somebody on staff that would just talk about their progress. I wouldn't be getting updates like that.
Well, you're given, I believe it's monthly updates about your student. I have a program breakdown that gives a little more information.
I would love to
send you if you'd like.
I did receive the program breakdown, and it let me know that they facilitate visits monthly. They also facilitate weekly phone calls, which are on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. After enrollment, they do have a 4-week probation period on phone calls and visits where they encourage letters, like they said, but after that, you can communicate more openly with your child. They say the duration of the program is 12 months, but like we'll hear from Lynn, it took her 15 months to graduate, even doing everything right and not getting on D level where time essentially freezes and no progress can really be made. This program brochure just says that their school has dual accreditation through ICAA, which is private Christian schools, and advanced ed, which is public schools. They accept transcripts from anywhere, and their transcripts will be accepted anywhere. As we learned from Lynn, this really only matters if you actually test at grade level and can continue in the grade you're supposed to be upon exiting.
I have severe ADHD, so it makes it very difficult for me to learn in an online environment. I still don't do it as an adult. I avoid it at all costs. My grades definitely suffered. I missed an entire year of high school because I had no accommodations. I was terrible at I had no ADHD medication. I was terrible at trying to sit at a screen and do my homework all day. And so I basically lost out on what should have been my sophomore year. And I came back into high school as a sophomore when I should have been a junior. So I lost out on that entire year of education. I didn't even really learn correct biology and stuff like that. I could go on an entire rant. After school, that was where it would depend. If you had a discipline, like you had done something wrong and they gave you sentences to write, you would go in another room where it was quiet and everybody would just be writing sentences. But if you didn't have those, then you would get free time. You would just get to go color, play cards, read, really whatever you wanted, really. Socialize outside if it was nice. And then we would go to dinner. We would have a couple more chores throughout that where we were cleaning up dinner and stuff. And then every night we would have what was called I think it was PSLC, and I think it was PSNC, Personal Studies for New Christians. And that was a workbook that we would have to do every single night. We would have nightly devotionals where they would give us a chapter of the Bible and we would have to write a page about it. And if you didn't do those, you'd get a discipline. So we would do our nightly devotionals and then we would get ready for bed and we would go to bed. And that was pretty much our schedule, Monday through Friday. Weekends, we would have a deep cleaning day on Saturday, and then Sunday we would go to church, and then that was it. That was the every single day. The first thing I noticed was the discipline board, which is if you had sentences or you had a discipline assigned to you, it would be the number of them and whatever character quality they had assigned you to write out that many times right next to your name. Word fast was you were not allowed to talk in whatever certain space they deemed it. I would say we were on word fast more often than we weren't. We were on word fast in line. We were on word fast in our rooms. We were on word fast during school. We were on word fast anytime there wasn't a staff member present. We were allowed to talk less than we weren't. Staff members, if they wanted to, they could come up with some weird and unique disciplines because there's no guideline for how they should administer these disciplines. It really is just kind of whatever they come up with in the moment. I could see somebody on the board that they had to run a mile for their discipline, versus I had one staff member who gave me 500 sentences because I called a group of girls assholes.
In the frequently asked questions pamphlet they sent me, one of the questions was, what is the discipline system? They write, the discipline system consists of writing CQs for the most part. These are character qualities. Typically, a student will be assigned a character quality according to the offense that was made and write it a certain amount of times. For example, if a student was disrespectful, they could have to write the definition of reverence followed by scripture and some questions for thought. they could have to write this 25 times. Other disciplines consist of additional chores, extended kitchen duty, and the highest level of discipline is D level. This restricts all privileges, and time can potentially be added to the program. It's interesting here that they list 25 times as the example when Lynn suggests that they were instructed to write things hundreds of times.
There was no guidelines on that. D level was definitely the worst. That was no sitting on the furniture. You had different clothes. You couldn't talk to entry level students. But I think I think our diet specifically was one of the worst.
Diet specific to D level, or is that just for everybody?
Kind of everybody, but in opposite ways. For everybody, it was well known you were going to gain weight in that program, and that's something we would tell every single girl that when they came in, like, you are gonna gain weight, because like that the food there, it was very cheap, very carb heavy. It's just like it's gonna happen. So like that terms, like, and yeah, the diet was like not very good, but that's probably out of their control, whatever. As for the diet for the D level, that was something entirely different. So if you were on D level, you were not allowed to eat the same food as us anymore, and you didn't get any kind of like treat or anything really if like they had like a special treat that day. And your breakfast would be 2 boiled eggs, unsweetened, unflavored oatmeal, and your lunch would be tuna sandwiches and fruit and vegetables. But I literally saw girls just like eating a bowl of canned tuna and 4 slices of bread. And that would be like tuna sandwiches. And then dinner would be canned Chef Boyardee ravioli and fruits and vegetables, and then saltine crackers for snack. And that was it. And a lot of girls complained to their parents that they were not getting enough food, that they were constantly hungry. And they think the staff would just kind of be like, you get food, you just don't want to eat it because it's gross. And it's like, no shit, they don't want to eat it. It's disgusting. So that was the D level diet. And if you were caught giving a D level food at all, you would be put on the D level diet as well. Like, we were also incentivized to like not give them food and not give them snacks and stuff, or else we would be put on the same thing that they were. With our administration and like other staff, we had teachers, but they would just kind of like sit in the classroom while we did schoolwork on a computer. So they weren't really like teaching us per se. And then the administrative staff were honestly, whenever they would come in, it was just like a like, shut up, don't talk. Like for me, it was like, don't talk, just like observe, just like don't make yourself like noticeable. Level 1 or 2, they just don't want to see you rebel. They don't want to see you act out anymore. They don't want to see you talking about inappropriate things. They want to see you just getting along with the program. And level 2, they want to see you get comfortable with that. And for every single level, you have to recite a chapter or 2 of the Bible as well. You have to memorize and recite a chapter of the Bible. You have to read a book. Of them, I specifically remember for level 5, it was the 5 love languages. That was the book for that. I don't remember the rest of them, but I do remember that one. For level 3 and 4, they wanted to see you taking a position of leadership. They wanted to see you keeping the rules of the program if staff wasn't around. So if a girl does something bad right in front of you and you are a level 3 or 4 and you don't tell staff about it, then you can be at risk of having your level dropped because they don't see you deserving of that upper level authority. Because when you go up in levels, you are gaining more trust, and more trust in that program also means that you are eyes and ears just as much as the staff are. And so when you reach like level 5, for example, you're basically on par with an intern. Staff will ask level 5s to watch the room while they go out and do something. Level 5s will assist them if we're out and about and doing something in Tulsa. The more you progress through that program, the more responsibility you get and the more autonomy you get. And like level 5s are the only ones that are allowed to go off by themselves at all. It's kind of like the more you step into this leadership role, the more autonomy you gain. So then the more you uphold the rules of the program to keep that autonomy. And then at a certain point, they'll be like, okay, you're ready to go home. Or for some girls, they wouldn't feel that they had a good home environment to go back to. And then in that case, they would go and become interns, and then they would be staff in the program. Any kind of like authority or autonomy that we would really try to get for ourselves was denied. We weren't, we were told what to wear every single day. We weren't limited. We had a limited amount of makeup. Every single facet of autonomy was stripped from us, and they would say that with pride. They would say that their goal was to break us down into nothing so that they could build us back up again. And I think a lot of the girls did feel broken down and felt like they had, yeah, just been broken down, but they were never really built back up again. In terms of like trying to get access to new medication, or like a medication that you like may not be on immediately, but you think would be helpful, that's like non-existent.
Reading through the pamphlet they gave me and scouring their website, listening to Lynn talking about real trauma and mental health problems, I had to ask them myself if they would deal with basic medications, basic antidepressants. So I threw out Lexapro. Then I wanted to see if they would offer real support or help for a child that needed to slowly wean off of a medication. So I said that my daughter is on a pretty high dosage of Xanax. On a pretty high dose of Xanax. Their response wasn't what I thought it would be, and for those of you who think that their response sounds nice, just know that there's no chance that any detox would take a teenager who is just taking the prescribed amount of their medication. Although they do need to go through a slow tapering, and they will go through serious withdrawals if they don't do it slowly and appropriately. A detox center isn't made for you to get off of your anxiety medication. She is currently taking antidepressants. She is on Lexapro. Then she's taking Xanax as needed, but it's about 3 times daily now that she's taking it, about 10 milligrams, and that's as prescribed.
Sure. Yeah, they prefer to have the student go through detox if at all possible, because they want to see how they do without the medication. They are equipped to support certain medications, like if it's not the higher end medications, they can help administer that.
Like the Lexapro, for example, you think they would be able to continue, or would that be more medications that would be like over the counter?
Probably more over the counter, although I know some of the prescriptions they are able to help with. That would be a part of the enrollment process.
Okay. There was no licensed psychiatrist. There was one licensed therapist, but she wasn't currently practicing.
Teen Challenge isn't doing anything illegal, and if you really dig and you know the exact questions to ask, it would become clear that they're not actually receiving any kind of licensed help. But you need to know the right questions to ask. Like you hear in the phone calls, I have to sometimes ask 2 or 3 times, or ask if the medication would actually be their medication I'm asking about, or over-the-counter medications, to which they'll say, most likely over-the-counter medications. It's surprising to me that they don't have clear-cut answers to these questions, because even for my fictional daughter, which I'm getting a bit protective over now, I feel like these are the basic questions I would need to know before even considering a program like this. They specifically offer in the intake to help with issues such as your child being overactive, underactive, moody, apathetic, withdrawn, dealing with codependency, daydreaming, being sarcastic, whiny, fearful, being a liar, a manipulative child, having ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder, depression, anxiety, sleep problems, bedwetting, nail biting, over or under eating, disordered eating, chewing on things, lacking cause and effect, throwing temper tantrums, having anger, cheating, night terrors, sleepwalking, experiencing physical assault, experiencing molestation, experiencing rape, self-harm, use of pornography, sexually preoccupied, sexual behavior, verbal or physical aggression, stealing, fighting, abuse of others, gang-related activity, occult-related activity, and more. Some of these are serious, like running away, abusing other people. I could see needing to find somewhere for your child to be safe in situations like this and having a limited place to put them. But when we talk about things like experiencing physical assault, molestation, or rape, they need licensed therapy. This should not be among the concerns that you're sending your child to this program for. And no matter what they say, this is under the reason for requesting placement section. These are listed as reasons that parents might want to send them here. When you read through the pamphlets, they said there are some disqualifications for admission. For example, extreme substance abuse may require detox before they get to be enrolled. Then if they have extreme aggression, then that is also not allowed. But as we hear from Lynn, there are scenarios where there was extreme aggression and where children were needing to be restrained. The boarding school is also not set up for sexual harm to others or extreme mental health issues, so I don't know what that would mean. They don't list any examples of what would be considered extreme. In the pamphlet, what they list as your child receiving are the following opportunities: biblically based counseling, a weekly one-on-one mentoring with an advisor, bi-weekly one-on-one discipleship meetings with a life skills advisor, additional one-on-one discipleship meetings with staff as needed, daily Bible classes and individual study through GSNL, daily life-on-life discipleship through staff, upper-level students and interns, daily chores and frequent opportunities for service, year-round school every weekday except in the event of special events, chapel and church services twice each week, weekly church services with the Assemblies of God in Jay, Oklahoma, weekly updates from your student's advisor letting you know how your student is doing academically, emotionally, and behaviorally. They also have an opportunity for 2 mission trips a year, but these would be additional financial obligations for the family.
Physically, I didn't eat at all, like maybe a granola bar every other day, and I struggled with cutting. What led me to Adult and Teen Challenge was I had just tried to commit suicide. Like my mom and I got in a huge argument and I just like punched her in the face and I ran to my room and I was like cussing at my parents and everything, and I was like, I'm done, and I like took this like knife and I just like slit my wrists and everything. And then like I went and I took like the most meds I've had ever taken, and my parents were like so scared and like the police had to cuff me and everything.
I'm just trying to kind of assess my different options and what they would be. I want to understand what the frequency of therapy would be for them, if that's something that you offer, or if you guys utilize Christian therapists, licensed therapists, or what type of therapy would be provided.
Okay, what we have is Bible-based counseling, and that's they're given Bible study courses that they have to do along with their schoolwork, and then they have daily biblically based counseling. There's weekly one-on-one mentoring with an advisor. Let's see. They have life discipleship courses with the staff. They're given daily chores to do.
Okay.
Don't do psychological or psychiatric therapeutics,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have a counselors along those lines on staff.
So it would basically be more therapeutic programming, rather just trying to get an understanding, rather than her meeting like with a licensed therapist every single week. It would be more of a daily practice type of thing.
Yes.
I just don't think that it's accurate or fair to say that this alone can really help bring people the healing that they need. I know that right now I'm making a religious distinction, but when you are looking for real help for significant trauma or mental disturbances, I just think that a licensed therapist, at least for an initial assessment, is essential.
Ever wondered what your purpose in life is? Or felt like your days lacked meaning and significance? Perhaps your circumstance presents a seemingly insurmountable obstacle. Maybe you found yourself a long way down the wrong path. If you suspect you may be alone on a dark road to nowhere, we're here to assure you that there is hope. Adult and Teen Challenge is a tried and true solution to the drug epidemic here in America and around the world since 1958. We have been privileged to witness the transformation of thousands of lives through the power of Jesus Christ. Here in Oklahoma, each of our 6 Adult and Teen Challenge campuses offer a safe environment where men, women, and adolescents seeking restoration are equipped to overcome even the most challenging struggles. Students in our residential program attend Bible classes tailored to those dealing with life-controlling issues, gain valuable vocational training, and even have an opportunity to obtain their GED. Experienced staff and pastors are available around the clock to offer support and counseling to students, focusing on their spiritual growth and development of healthy life skills. Once the staff feels confident that the student has a solid understanding of what it means to be a Christian and they complete the year-long program, the restored individual can learn how to implement the skills they've acquired back in the world. If all this sounds too good to be true, just remember that with man, some things are possible, but with God, all things are possible.
Both Lynn's story and the clips from other girls that are shared on Teen Challenge's own YouTube channel, you can see that the issues that they're dealing with deserve to be treated by a licensed mental health professional. Although they're not doing anything illegal, I would argue that it is highly unethical to promote your program as specifically dealing with these issues when it's actually not equipped to support these girls in this way. Lynn makes the distinguishment multiple times throughout our conversation that the difference for her is that in the adolescent program, the teenagers don't consent to being there. In the adult program, they can do their own research, see if it would be a good fit, and decide for themselves if they want to participate in the program. For the adolescents, they're simply stuck without medication or without any kind of trauma-informed help for over a year. It's unclear to me through the site how they actually address these issues. They do say that the model is building a relationship with God, which results in sobriety for the participants. But again, the main reasons that people turn to drugs are trauma or co-occurring mental health disorders or other things that have occurred and gone wrong. They deserve real help and treatment that can help them find lasting peace and sobriety. My primary concern is that parents that aren't educated about these terms would send their kids to these programs thinking that they are, in fact, receiving this type of help. Although Teen Challenge, if you read the fine print, does share that they don't give that kind of help, words like counselor mean the same thing as therapist to the average person. Most people don't know that the word therapist is regulated, whereas counselor or coach, life coach, is not. And so you can say that your child would be receiving life coaching, which could come from anyone they pull off the street. They could receive counseling from interns in the program or other students if they wanted. These terms aren't regulated, but to the average person, they carry a bit more weight. So I think it's important to make the distinction that a lot of parents may be sending their kids to these programs under the assumption that they are receiving some type of regular help. I would also assume that the staff or the admins that they're meeting with or doing these studies with are licensed in some way. If you sent your kid to a treatment center, the techs would be required to have some level of a degree or education or licensure. Even the people that haven't had a degree yet will be required to have something or some level of education. But again, when you use terms like counselor, like admin, like intern, like staff, these aren't regulated, and while they mean something to the parents, they mean something completely different to the government, and it makes everything that's happening here completely legal.
I remember times where I would have like a really, really bad anxiety attack and I would just need to go like literally just lay on the floor in the fetal position, and like they would let me do that. But then there would be other times where if a girl was like if you were like profusely crying or having flashbacks or any kind of physical symptom of a mental health crisis, they would label it as like spiritual warfare. The devil. It was all the enemy. It was all these evil spiritual forces that you were succumbing to or that were inside you already. It all came down to like some kind of demonic or dark force. It was always like this mystical thing. For the longest time, I never really felt like I had a concrete answer on my trauma. It was really just like the devil. The only kind of like therapy we got was discipleship. That was the only option. Most like, I guess, progress I would see people make would be during worship or during those very high intensity, high emotional moments. We weren't allowed to like disclose our trauma really to other students or like talk about what brought us there. It was weird. It was like you could, but you only could if you were like, it was like a testimony. You were like using it to bring somebody closer to Christ, basically. Personally, I just kind of like shut down and kind of compartmentalized a lot of my trauma. I kind of entered a survival mode really, where my trauma was almost like kind of shoved into a box in my brain because I wasn't in a space where I could unpack any of it and like delve into it. So I just had a lot of anxiety, but we never really talked to anybody. My research and kind of on my public platforms, I talk a lot about something called D level, which is the most like disciplinary level that you can possibly be on. I remember being two girls in orange jumpsuits and not understanding why, or girls sitting on the floor because they were on D level and not really knowing why. I would have periods where I did feel like safe, but then I would have periods where something would kind of like disrupt that and I wouldn't feel safe. So like the easiest way that I can think of to explain it is I remember in like my first month there was this one girl who had been, I think she was taken in from like a foster care group home or something like that. She was kind of one of the only girls I ever saw that just had like very physical outbursts, very violent and angry outbursts that aren't even really necessarily her fault. I remember her just being triggered very easily. Like you would just say like one thing and she would fly off the handle. And it got so bad one night that we all had to close our doors and go to bed early. And we never closed our doors. That was like a big no-no there. You do not do that. The fact that they had us like close our doors and we would just hear her screaming and trying to get her to calm down, it not working. I think they ended up calling the police at one point. So like we would hear her being taken out by police. There would be situations where one girl would like where she would have a very physical or angry outburst and we would all be like taken into another room or another part of the campus and just kind of have to like sit there and wait it out. And so when situations like that happened, it was obviously very unsettling. I had never really grown up in a place where I'd seen stuff like that. I hadn't gone to any mental hospitals before that experience. I had a relatively normal upbringing. So it was all new to me. For at least the first like 3 months, I was just like wide-eyed, like taking it all in. What the hell is even happening? See, there was an individual that was severely autistic and it was adamant, like we could just see it, and they were not given the tools that they should have been given. They had a very hard time communicating, they had a very hard time socializing, and they would be ostracized by the girls even more because we were already in a very click heavy environment. And it got to the point where this individual, they didn't know how to properly like clean themselves, and they would just kind of be again like ostracized instead of like really, and it's tragic to think of that, but like they should have been taught like how to do that stuff. It got to a point where they were drinking soap to try and kill themselves, and they responded to that by taking all of the girls' soap, like all of their roommates and their soap out of the room. So instead of really receiving help, their roommates would just be mad at them because their soap got taken out of the room. Like, why do you do this? You know, like no understanding and no compassion, just silencing and restricting, I think was how, and I think that if in the moments where they did have outbursts because they were having sensory issues or they were feeling misunderstood, again, it would be labeled as like a demonic presence almost. So they had to like go to the staff to get their soap, basically. Like they would have to like go, and like all the people in that room would have to like go to the staff individually and like ask for their soap. So it was, I don't, you know, I can't speak on how they've interpreted that situation, but at least for me, I would feel incredibly embarrassed. I have one very vivid memory of this girl, and she just constantly had outbursts and things like that. And it got to the point where she was given an ankle monitor. And it was one of those things where, again, you would just say something and she would just flip off the handle. That was one of those scenarios. And she was refusing to plug in her ankle monitor charger. They like held her down, duct taped the charger to her ankle monitor, and like held her down while it charged, basically. So that's kind of what goes back to like the submission thing. It's like if you would constantly observe that, like if you don't go with what they want you to do, this is what it will escalate to. And they are not afraid to escalate it to that point. I think Teen Challenge plays into this very noble image of these like saviors that are doing this truly great work, but they don't really show the horrible things that happen on the way to get there. I think a lot of it comes from also the limited communication. You know, we weren't allowed to tell our parents how bad it was there. And if we did, we were labeled as liars and that we were manipulating and we just wanted to get out. So anytime you would try and say something like that, you would just be like misunderstood. And so I think that not only leads to I think it leads to two things. I think it leads to a lot of people not speaking out because they'll just feel like they're going to be invalidated again, or like they don't even want to go back to that place in their life. And so that continues the cycle because nobody is speaking up about it. But I also think that I think religion can excuse a lot of things. And I think that Teen Challenge utilizes that to the fullest extent. I think there is a lot of cognitive dissonance that occurs that allows for people to dismiss these behaviors by these adults onto children in the name of like this image of something better. A lot of these kids, that better never comes. They just constantly feel broken and they constantly feel shame, but they are putting on this image of being healed. And so that image goes out into the world and it continues that cycle. You don't question the program. You don't really question Teen Challenge. If you question your faith, it's kind of another thing that's kind of seen like as a personal journey kind of thing. Even then, none of the answers ever felt satisfactory. They would always say that you didn't have to be a Christian to graduate the program, but I did not see one girl graduate that program that was an acclaimed atheist. I did not see it a single time. And so it was almost, at least for me, I cannot speak for everybody, but at least for me, it would kind of start out with questions and just kind of not receiving satisfactory answers. You're just rebellious. Whenever I kind of got to a certain point that I just didn't really feel like I was going to get any answers, that's when I just kind of started faking it, just kind of putting on a facade almost. You had to submit in one way, shape, or form, whether it was to the program, to the staff, to God, whatever it was. It was essential. There was no other way to get through the program. Like every girl kind of reached a point, the girls who graduated at least, they would reach a point where they would just kind of submit to the program, to the ways of the program. And that was seen as success. It was seen as progress. They loved to put our trauma on display and put our testimonials on display. They would constantly ask us to take videos like with our testimonies, like talking about what brought us there and what it was like finding Jesus.
The reality is, these programs are incredibly expensive. They even encourage parents to start diving into college savings if necessary to afford the program. Just listen to this call where they break down the pricing for me.
Invoice the $4,450 once a month for the duration of the program, which is 12 months.
Okay.
The enrollment fee of $2,500 is a one-time fee, and that's due on enrollment once you're accepted.
Okay. Okay.
My name is Michael Loki, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Adolescent Centers of Teen Challenge Oklahoma. And I'm coming to you today with a very special request. This is a season of giving. Tuesday after Thanksgiving is called Giving Tuesday, and we have year-end. If you want to get any tax breaks for next year, or for this coming tax season, now's the time to give. And I want to tell you somewhere that you can give where your money will make a difference in a student's life. That's Teen Challenge Adolescent Centers. Your monetary gift helps us keep the national average of tuition for boarding schools below the national average. It helps us be able to partial scholarship some students that need help, that families can't afford care. It also helps us to keep running with 30 staff and 1,000 acres and a fully accredited school with athletics and $250 helmets that the boys each have to wear to keep them safe. All that stuff costs money and requires equipment. So if you don't have the money to give, then if you have a car, tractor, mowing equipment, or other things that you think that we could use, all of those things you could get an in-kind receipt or a tax deduction.
For over $40,000 a year, it is insane to me that a licensed therapist is not on site. For them to take the payment of 2 of the girls there, they'd be able to employ full-time at least one therapist who could meet with the girls, even once a month, to check in on things. They certainly can afford to employ a nurse or a doctor on site who can make sure that the girls are being safe. There was a girl who actually passed away in Florida because of medical negligence at one of these programs. These kinds of things wouldn't happen if they had the appropriate staff on site, and I know that it is a financial burden, but after seeing the pricing it costs to send your children there, along with the donations that they do receive from churches and the government, it's shocking to me that they don't employ these kinds of help.
Boarding school for troubled girls in Polk County has closed. It comes 2 years after a 17-year-old died there. She'd been asking to see a doctor for weeks, but died without ever receiving real medical care. Fox 13's Ken Suarez is live from the Lakeland Girls Academy with more on the fallout. Ken.
Well, I can tell you, after Naomi Wood died at this place, the student population got lower and lower and lower, and presumably as a result of that, the organization, the national organization that runs the place called Teen Challenge, just decided to close it. Naomi Wood was 17 years old, bubbly and full of smiles.
I miss her hand, grabbing my hand and hearing her voice say, "Dad." Probably the most.
Naomi died while under the care of Lakeland Girls Academy, a place where troubled teens came for help. After a firestorm of controversy, it just closed. Her family says it was long overdue.
The bottom line is she was neglected, and there's a good chance she would be alive today had they actually taken action and took her to a doctor.
Back in 2020, Naomi had stomach pains for weeks and kept asking to see a doctor. Instead, she was repeatedly given Pepto-Bismol and died. The head of Florida's Child Protective Team wrote her death was consistent with delay in seeking care and medical neglect. The Polk Sheriff's Office launched an investigation. No one was charged criminally. However, Naomi's story encouraged former students to tell their stories about what was life at the school. Grace Coburn and others described living under unyielding rules and in isolation.
We had no way of calling anyone on our own, getting help for ourselves. All of our abilities to access the outside world were completely taken away from us.
The school's disciplines, such as shunning, also came under fire. Naomi is gone, so is Lakeland Girls Academy. But Teen Challenge, which runs schools like this all over the country, is still operating.
Imagine the positive impact that could be made if these girls were sent to a location where there was a therapist that they regularly met with, if staff had received basic trauma-informed training, if they had access to medications, to diagnoses, to learning disorders or mental health conditions that may have gone untreated, for someone to be there to actually help with trauma. Of course, I understand that this is a religious-based program, and they do say that, but the reality is healing isn't possible for these types of issues that are listed if you don't have real help. For this amount of money, you could get your child the best therapy available. You could send them to one of the best treatment centers around, one that offers them licensed therapists and programming that has clinical support. Even hiring someone with basic teaching credentials to sit in the classroom and actually help the students or identify learning disorders or help children with additional testing or support would be essential, but they don't even receive things like this. And the job listings, they pay minimum wage at best. They pay minimum wage or a little bit over at best, and they definitely don't have any sort of credentials that would make someone qualified to be providing the type of care. Take this job listing for Brush Creek or New Life House Direct Care. It's in Disney, Oklahoma, where we're kind of focusing. Oklahoma is the state of focus. And it says that for minimum experience, you need none. You're doing direct support and day-to-day care with the students, but all you need is a high school diploma or GED, and you have to be 21 years old. That's it. You don't need any education, nothing specific to the program, no experience directly with dealing with people with trauma, with mental illnesses, or with substance use disorders. This job position is just one example of many. Go ahead and look it up yourself if you don't believe me. This is directly on the Teen Challenge of Oklahoma site. They all are as vague as this almost, and it's concerning to see what a limited amount of requirements there are for these positions. This one is for a teacher position at a boys' academy, but the only qualifications listed are bachelor degrees in related fields such as education, math, English, etc., but they'll train the right person and are willing to look past that, and they have to be at least 21 years old. That means that I technically would qualify to be a teacher at this program, even though I wouldn't qualify to be a teacher anywhere else, and my degree has nothing to do with teaching. I'm certainly not a licensed teacher. After all of this, I have to ask myself a few questions. What happens once they leave the program? Teen Challenge does talk about some supports for after the program, and some students who don't have a good home life are allowed to stay as interns. But for students who feel traumatized by the program and who did not receive the help they needed, did not receive the trauma-informed care that they deserved, and still are in need of medication or therapy, what does life look like once they get out? What does life look like once they're taken out of a high-control religious environment? For these children, they weren't allowed to speak to their peers, their old friends, while they were in the program for a year or a year and a half. They have less connections when they leave and might even have damaged relationships with their families. They might be less connected when they come out of the program than when they went in. So what does life look like for these children who have been shoved away, left to push off their trauma for a year and a half, only to come out and still be provided with no support?
When I went back into the world, I knew that I was changed. I knew I wasn't the same. I knew I had seen more than a lot of my peers, and I never felt mentally connected to my peers in high school after I left that place. I always felt older, more mature. I could never connect with people my age the same way again. That resulted in me kind of living my life in survival mode until I turned 18, because I was also under the constant idea that I could be sent back if I did something bad. And I didn't want to be sent back. For me, I didn't really acknowledge or even really deal with my trauma, even though I knew it was bad and I knew it was wrong, really until I turned 18. And that was when I had gotten my complex PTSD diagnosis. And that was incredibly validating for me because I got it from multiple people. And I was constantly invalidating my own trauma before that experience. I had completely normalized it in my own brain. Even by the time I turned 21 and was in college and talking about this experience with my academic mentor, and just seeing the looks on her face kind of made me realize, like, oh, I need to like do something with this. Like, this is not normal. I am a very big believer in things like EMDR therapy, trauma-informed therapy, so I find it very, very helpful. However, I do know girls that have never really been able to go back to therapy or really open the door on those experiences and kind of continue in that state that I was, which is just kind of ignoring of fear. And I knew that I didn't feel resolved from the things that had brought me there in the first place. Never really felt healed. I just felt like disciplined, and I just felt like I'd learned my lesson, and like that was it, you know. But like even after I left, I left in like the summer. So I had like kind of a whole summer with my family before I was re-enrolled into high school. And when I was re-enrolled into high school, it was bad. I went back to almost the exact same things that I was doing. I did worse things than I had done, like substance wise, when I had gone back into high school than I went in before I went into that program. It wasn't really until I turned 18 and I could like breathe that I was a legal adult and nobody could do anything to me anymore, that I felt like almost like safe to progress in life. Like I kind of just felt like I was existing and just like this liminal space almost of not feeling connected with my peers, not feeling very academically inclined, not feeling very driven to any specific path in life. But just being out for and being in the world, that was enough. And then my senior year, when I turned 18, I kind of realized that with the way that my grades were looking, I was not going to get into college. And so that's kind of what caused me to like shape up a little bit and take my schooling seriously. And then I got into college and I realized I really did like school. And so that's kind of where my healing began, I think, is when I got into college and I could start to live my life again, without that veil of fear over it. I think is really where I started to kind of come out of that little mental box that I had shoved myself in for so long.
Among those that I'm concerned for, those leaving the program, those whose parents put them in the program for reasons like reading smut or a masturbation addiction or potentially dabbling in weed, even beyond those kids are the kids who don't have anywhere to go, who actually age out of the program and check themselves out. When that happens, it's well documented that they don't help them get anywhere. These sites are located in very rural areas, and you're not really able to just walk places. It's dangerous and a guaranteed way to get into worse drugs or a dangerous person's vehicle. The thought of aging out of one of these types of programs and choosing to leave the abusive environment that you are in, that is one of the scariest things that I can think of.
I will speak about one person's experience. They had left the program when they were 18, because that's another thing. If you're 18, you can leave, but you walk out the doors with nothing. You don't have any of your stuff. You don't have no money. They don't give you a phone call. They don't give you a ride to town, nothing. You just walk out the door. So this very specific girl, I watched her just walk out the door, and I never saw her again. And I had the opportunity to interview them again. And they told me that after that experience, literally minutes later, they were picked up by strangers off the side of the road, and they engaged in meth for the very first time in their life. And they were eventually roped into escorting, and they were eventually taken over state lines without their IDs. And they were just invested in a life of escorting and drug use until they got pregnant and they decided to get sober for their child. And now they have a very, very successful career, and they've done a lot of work for themselves. But that person directly did more substances and experienced a worse life than they would have if they were not in Teen Challenge. But it didn't equip them with any way to really deal with the trauma that they had before or after or during. So a lot of these students I will see enter maybe self-destructive periods for a time as a result of the trauma that they faced from that program, and then subsequently not have any tools to deal with that trauma because of the program, because praying only does so much, and when you're only taught to pray about your problems and pray about your experiences and give it over to a higher power, but you're still left over with all of these horrible feelings and experiences, I think a lot of these students just felt lost. And I think a lot of them felt almost lied to, like they were supposed to go somewhere that was going to help them, and they were only made worse.
The study that they based their incredible results off of was commissioned by Adult and Teen Challenge. It evaluates the long-term impact of their Christian recovery program on graduates, and I'll give you guys a quick summary of it so that you can see what they found and some of the problems and limitations with this study. The key number is that they found that 78% of graduates reported being completely sober months after leaving the program. If you're familiar with rehabs or sobriety or substance use disorders, you know that that is an incredibly high stat, way above the baseline. It also shows that graduates increased across the board in things like civic engagements, not having legal problems now, having psychological well-being, stronger relationships, and a deepened faith in God. And they were highly satisfied. Over 92% of the graduates were highly satisfied with the program, and they praised the Christian environment, the daily schedule, and the Bible studies. While these numbers sound great, and they're some of the main numbers that Teen Challenge uses to get people into the programs, it's really important to look at the study's limitations, which the researchers themselves acknowledge in the report, but who has the time to read? These are some of the biggest problems with interpreting these results. The first is the self-reported data and bias. The study relies entirely on what people said about themselves through a survey that Teen Challenge put on themselves. People tend to report what they think sounds good, especially in situations like this. This is called social desirability bias. So, are people truly 100% sober, or are they just saying what they believe the program wants to hear? We can't really be totally sure. Then, the response rate. Only 35% of the graduates they contacted even completed the survey. Think about that. Almost 2/3 didn't respond, and I think it's likely that the people that did respond were the people that were doing well. The researchers admit that the people who did respond are likely those doing well and who are happy with the program. If you're struggling or you hate the program, you're going to be less likely to fill out a survey for them. This means that the sample probably doesn't truly represent all graduates. The study only looked at graduates who successfully completed the entire 12 to 18 month program. That's the other thing. What about the people who dropped out after a few months or whose parents pulled them out? We have no data on their outcomes or why they left or what percentage of people drop out before completing the program. This is a pretty big blind spot. If 60% of participants drop out, it doesn't really matter that 85% rated the program as being awesome or whatever the number really was. Then there's a heavy influence of the current staff on the residents. It's a kind of a big deal and we can't go forward without saying it. Over half of the survey respondents were currently working as staff members or interns at Adult Teen Challenge. Nearly 1/3 were living in their housing. This shows itself that there are skewed results and it's going to be skewed towards success. If they stayed in the program, are living in their housing, are interns or employed by them, it's highly likely that they're going to rate them well, whether they feel that way or not. Because only 39.7% of the centers participated in recruiting graduates, and given the low response rate and sample composition, the researchers explicitly state that you cannot generalize these results to all centers nationwide. This isn't a national representative study. So while the study does paint a positive picture for graduates who participate and stay connected to the program and complete it completely, the significant limitations mean that we should view these really high success rates with a lot of caution, and the websites that promote this number of success or labeling themselves as one of the most effective programs in the country are not necessarily being completely forthcoming. I think that they're not outright lying. That is what the study they conducted said, but it takes some finer tuning to understand what's actually going on here.
Okay, I'm just going to say this last part. If the success rate, which is it's over 75% success rate, is what they say. If that was true, then the 30, or you're telling me the 30 women that were in our home, that in that time frame, 2 passed away, some were in prison, and mostly all relapsed? Okay, so out of the time I was there, those 30 women I was in the home with, mostly all relapsed, died, or are in prison now. So how is that success rate still allowed to be said? That's not a study. If you look on Wikipedia, it will tell you that. People do not do their investigating on this place, and the way their website looks is so misleading. The way all their promo videos look are so misleading. I've already made a video about the promo videos. These students have to do those videos, and they have to be good at it. They will not choose people to do those videos if they're not happy there. And there's people there that are not happy there. Like, because you're being brainwashed, and there's like a fight between, do I give in or do I maintain my authenticity and who I am as a person? And I'm sorry, but at some point, well, for most of us, I met one girl one time that gave into the rules, but not who she was as a person. And she left as soon as she left, and she could tell the difference by the whole year. It was fascinating. But for me and many others, we were brainwashed around 4 months is when it started happening, when I started feeling it, I guess. And I was just this huge Christian who judged people all the time, and who went by the Bible and only the Bible. That's all I believed in, and I quoted scripture all the time, and I prayed all the time, and I prayed for people all the time with these prayers, and I went to all these churches, and I talked about the glory of God and how he saved my life. And now I just look back and I think I have no idea who that person was. Absolutely no idea, because I was severely brainwashed. Someone asked me yesterday, how are you brainwashed? Well, because we did the same thing every single day. We read the same Bible stuff every day. We went to church almost, we were basically in church while we were living. And then we went to churches on the weekend. So we were only surrounded by church and the Bible and God. That they would tell you there's only one way to get sober, and that's through God. So the longer you spend there, the harder it is when you leave.
The reality is there's not a lot we can do to make a difference, but it starts with speaking up and making a difference on a governmental level.
I think it's important for former students of these programs to speak out no matter what their life circumstances look like, whether they are better now, whether they aren't better now. I think all of it needs to be spoken about, because I think that just the picture perfect image of this kid that was addicted to drugs and then went into this program and is now in college or whatever, and there's no speaking about what the process was like to get there. I think it allows for a lot of parents to misunderstand or think that this program is going to do something that it's not. But I also do think it's about a limited amount of options too. I know for my parents, there was no other option. There was nothing else. Like every other teen challenge they had looked into looked far worse than the one that I went to. And so they felt that they made the best possible decision they could at the time. While I may kind of disagree with that, I do understand where they were coming from, but I think the lack of mental health options for one, adolescents in general, but two, adolescents that are dealing with substance addiction is almost criminal. I knew a girl who was in my program because she read romance novels. That was it. That was it. They do not have any kind of state oversight, and that was very intentional. And I think it's what allows the harm to progress so much, because there's no state oversight into these programs.
Let's be clear. Teen Challenge isn't doing this in silence or in a void. They're not doing this in secrecy or under the cover of night. They're not hiding, and they're not sneaking around because they just don't have to. They're not breaking the law because the law actually allows all of this. Like we've been saying, the law actually doesn't just allow it, it helps fund it. This program and others like it are allowed to operate under religious freedom and other loopholes without licensed therapists, state oversight, without clinical standards, and they can still accept vulnerable teenagers for serious issues like addiction, trauma, abuse, and mental illness. It's not an oversight. That's a system working exactly the way that it was built. It was built to protect the institution, not the child. Somehow, even with survivor accounts, even with incredible people like Lynn who are putting in the hard work to heal and get their story out there, even with public whistleblowers and years of documented harm, these programs still receive donations. They still receive backing from churches and minimal public coverage of what goes on. They still receive referrals, and yes, some of them still even receive indirect government support through court referrals, school partnerships, probation officers, and public grants filtered through faith-based initiatives. We need to stop pretending when we hear news of something going wrong at a facility like this that it is some rogue incident that we caught wind of, that is atrocious and rarely goes on at other sites. This is not just one organization that is slipping through the cracks. This is how they're designed. There are no cracks. You're seeing the whole picture here. And the gaps in the regulation, the religious exemptions, and the total lack of accountability, those are the policy. This is the framework. This is the permission slip. And I don't want to keep harping on it, but I want to make sure that I'm being really clear here. This isn't an expose on Teen Challenge because they've been open about this is who they are. It's just misleading to the average person. And this isn't attacking them because they're not technically doing anything wrong. Even though I take great moral issue with some of the things that are going on, legally, they're more in the clear than I am. Probably if you go check the cameras I've sped in the last few weeks. But Teen Challenge, they really haven't done anything wrong. This isn't a failure to enforce the law or interpret it. This is a failure to write laws and put laws in place that are actually going to protect kids. We've seen people like Paris Hilton bringing up experiences that they've had at these types of camps and trying to get laws in place that will make a difference. But it's hard to pinpoint exactly what camps are there to really help and what kind of camps are going to traumatize your children even further. It's unfortunate that parents have to be in a place where they know the difference in terminology between counselor, life coach, advisor, staff, and therapist. The fact that only one of those has to be licensed or has to be older than 21 or have more than a GED, most people don't know those things, and that's not an oversight. That is how it works on purpose. It's not terrible parents typically sending their kids to these programs. It's parents that are terrified and feel like they don't have options, and this picture that they're sold is not really an accurate picture of what goes on. It isn't just a story about Teen Challenge. It's a story about how in the United States, we allow things like this to continue by minimizing the voices of children, minimizing the voices of trauma survivors, and minimizing the voices of people who struggle with substance use disorders. That's what it comes down to. If this was a chain of private schools that was filled with kids that didn't have a reputation for having behavioral issues for substance use disorders, people would be outraged, but they're not, because the reality is people have so much stigma around mental health and substance use disorders. These kids are not bad kids. They are kids who are deserving of help and love and protection, and they're deserving of real support. And their parents are deserving to have direction. If they have $40,000 worth spending on their children to save their lives, what they believe are really going to change the course of their children's lives, they deserve to have someone directing them to actual help for their children. The fact that they're giving someone this much money every single year to simply throw a Bible at them and put them on talking fast, this is systemic. And if we don't change it, we are complicit. I think that Teen Challenge is a really good place to start because Teen Challenge has a base that might be fixable. As Lynn has stated, she doesn't necessarily want Teen Challenge to go away. She doesn't necessarily want to shut down all of the centers. She just wants to see there be a little bit of reform for these centers to help people even more. A little bit of change wouldn't be a financial hardship on these institutions.
My work could do one thing. I want them to at least have a state law or state obligation that they have to abide by to make sure that every single student is receiving the bare minimum level of care. And I don't think those students do. Would I like to see every single Teen Challenge that's for adolescents shut down? Maybe, but that's not what my work is trying to do. My work is trying to make it so that there is more, regulations and visibility in this topic. There is very, very limited visibility about teen adolescents and drug abuse, and specifically these Christian programs in the sociological research space. And so something that I was very, very passionate about is bringing these conversations into a prestigious and academic space, because I think there's a lot of shame. And I think there's a certain image in people's minds of what drug addicts look like, or what drug addicts or former addicts behave like. And I know I don't fit that image. I want to almost use that to my advantage to show people that we can get better. And that's not necessarily because of these programs, but it's in spite of it, if anything. I want to change a lot of things, but if I had to just focus on one thing, it would most definitely be just some kind of regulation and oversight on these programs, because right now they're completely autonomous, and that is dangerous.
Studies show that there is a severe and persistent problem of abuse and neglect in the U.S. teen residential rehabilitation industry. Despite multiple congressional investigations dating all the way back to the 1970s, which uncovered thousands of abuse cases and numerous fatalities, the industry remains largely unregulated. Abusive programs, often modeled on previous defunct ones, simply reemerge under new identities. Studies highlight a weak patchwork of state and federal oversight, allowing facilities to operate without adequate licensing or inspections. This lack of accountability extends to political influence, preventing effective regulation and denying child protective services access. Kids don't even have the ability to phone call out to seek help if they need it. They can't report abuse if they need to. The problem has even been exported globally, with U.S. teens facing abuse in foreign facilities. The problem isn't getting better, it's growing, and new loopholes are being found. Studies point to a systemic failure to protect youth, citing criminal acts including murder, torture, sexual assault, and they ultimately link these abuses to increased juvenile suicide rates. This isn't specific to the Teen Challenge programs now, but this is indicative of a larger issue. These studies, which I'll link in the description, criticize the US government for its entrenched unwillingness to address the root causes, leaving victims without any sort of legal recourse or justice, and mandated reporters are vulnerable to retaliation. Even for people that want to speak out, there is valid reasons for fear and hesitancy there. Ultimately, these studies conclude that these unaddressed human rights violations constitute a crime against humanity, because that's really what it is. Often, these topics are hard to talk about and are supported very minimally by the parents that sent kids into these programs. The fear that parents experience when they choose to send these children into programs like this is very real, and it can be hard for parents to accept that they sent their children into worse abuse and worse trauma. That is oftentimes the case.
This process, most of them don't even know it's happening until it's far too late, and they just find themselves in it. And that, in my research, I think is one of the most catastrophic things about Teen Challenge, is that these students have their autonomy stripped from them from the very beginning. And that makes it very, very difficult to feel any kind of safety, but also relinquish any kind of control to a program, I think, without faking it.
Anything else that you want people to know, or is there anywhere that they can find you if people are watching this and they're like, we would love to contribute to your research? Is that something that you'd be interested in? Or
Yeah, I'll give you my Instagram and my TikTok, just because a lot of it is like, if anybody wants me to, like, if anybody just wanted to learn more about it, I talk about it a lot on my TikTok.
So what do you guys think? I'm really excited to hear your thoughts in the comments and all of the love that I hope that you're going to share with Lynn, because it definitely took a lot for her to have the bravery to come and share her story, and she also shared a lot of the research for this video. I can't understate how much effort Lynn has put into this, into her education, and into making a difference for other girls who are going through similar things that she did at these types of camps. Please like this video and subscribe. Please hit share and copy link. You don't have to send it anywhere, I promise, but it helps way more than you think that it does. I am so excited about the channel's growth. I just hit 10,000 subs after about 4 months of doing this, and it has been so much fun and grown so much more quickly than I ever could have imagined. So thank you guys so much. I don't know, it just means a lot to me. So yeah, thank you guys so much. If you are ever interested in joining me and having a conversation about your story and sharing something more about the topics that I discuss on my channel, I would love to hear more. You can fill out the form that's in the description of my channel that will allow you to share a little bit more about the details, and then I'll be able to get in touch with you and we can go from there. I'm a little slow moving right now, but please still do fill it out. I do get through all of them eventually, I promise, and I would love to hear more. I hope you have a great week.
Yes, God, I ask him that you would strip him of everything. Strip him of his clothes, God. Strip him of his underwear, Father. Strip him of his bed.
Thank you, God. Don't hold back, Lord. Yes, Lord. Put him in a jar. Pickle him in the spirit, Lord. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
Pickle him? What's a pickle?
Noah is like a seed that dies in the ground, God.
Lord, just like an itch in his heart. Chafe him, God. Chafe him, Father. Chafe him, God. Just itch him.
Do it, Lord.
Scratch him. Scrape him.
Yes, Lord.
Yes, Lord. All right. This isn't it.
This isn't right.